So before we jump into today's video, I'm going to answer a question from the YouTube channel. So David Benton asked, when should you switch to a trans brake setup? That's a great question. So that really depends a lot on if you're two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive and how serious you are on racing. So assuming you're trying to go as fast as you can possibly go, on a two-wheel drive, a trans brake is very important. You never want your chassis to be loaded at the starting line. So when you're foot braking, you're actually torquing the chassis over, you're preloading everything. And the problem with that is you can't set the tire the way it wants to be snapped. The tire, the chassis wants to be neutraled out, and it wants to just be smacked with force off the starting line. And this sets your traction in motion, which is going to therefore help weight transfer the front and keep the traction on the back. And it's really important with a bad weight bias truck, like all these trucks are, that you really snap that tire to get the weight transfer process moving. So really, when you try to start going faster than 150s, you can go mid 140, 60 foots on a foot brake on a two-wheel drive. That's where you'll really start to see what I'm talking about. The tire won't be snapped and it won't be set, and so it'll be driving into power. And every time you drive into power, it wants to spin, and it spins uncontrollably. So anything, if you're trying to go faster really than mid 140, 60 foots, the trans brake is a necessity on a two-wheel drive. On a four-wheel drive, you can get away with a lot more foot braking because of the natural weight transfer that the front axle gives you. The tire doesn't need to be snapped as hard on a four-wheel drive up until a certain point. About bottom 130, 60 foots is about the best that you're gonna get with a four-wheel drive foot braking it, because ultimately a chassis is a chassis, a tire is a tire. They want to be snapped, they want to be set. It's just you have a little bit more buffer room on a four-wheel drive. So if you're trying to go faster than 130s in the 60 foot, that's when a trans brake is a necessity there as well. Hello YouTube peoples. I had a grand idea for today's video. I did a bunch of winter upgrades. Didn't really feel like winter when it was 70 degrees when I was working on them. But I did a bunch of upgrades to the Fossil, changed some stuff up, and I had these big plans to do this really cool video with these really cool shots of me showing you how fast this thing will spool up with the new setup and all this stuff. But as this truck loves to fight me like it has since day one, I ran into some issues and that didn't happen. So unfortunately this video is not as cool as I thought it was going to be, but I'm getting ready to go out of town Wednesday to go visit my man JP, and I don't want to keep you guys waiting any longer. I want to give you some sort of update on the truck. A lot of guys have been asking about it, so let's talk about what I have done, where we're at, and what the plans are. So probably the biggest visual difference that I upgraded on the truck is the intercooler piping. As you guys have seen it before, well actually it's right here. It was just that mild steel. It was actually aluminized exhaust tubing is what it started off as, and it had those bellows in it. And like I talked about in the previous video, the bellows expanded. You got to run turnbuckles and all kinds of stuff with them. Like, it's just old school setup. There's a lot better options out. So we did these aluminum intercooler piping. I got all the material from my good buddy Chris Maston at MassFab, and he supplied me with all of the Vibrant stuff that we use. So we're running the Vibrant, I don't even know what you call those things, but the ones that have the flex in them. Same things we were running in JP's truck with really good success. So this setup here, not only does it look really great, but now I don't have to worry about those stupid elbows. Everything is O-ring now. Before I was having to silicone the turbo and silicone the intake and silicone the connections at the intercooler. It was just some really janky stuff that I made a long time ago, and it actually just happened to fit in this truck, and so in the order of time I just ran it, but it really showed that it needed to be replaced. It was actually leaking in a couple places, so I'm really curious to see how much that'll help spool up, because a leak, a boost leak of any sort, will kill your spool up tremendously. It's kind of crazy. It won't affect down track power as much as you think, but it will kill your spool up. And so anyway, so this setup should be way better. These old pipes, believe it or not, these were, like you see them right here, were 17 pounds. I'll throw up a picture of the scale when I weighed them so you believe me. And then these new aluminum, these are all vibrant tubes, by the way, so like all the material is vibrant stuff, and then Chris welded it all up real nice for us. But these are 5 pounds for both. So we saved 12 pounds just by getting rid of that old intercooler piping and getting away from that jankiness. And then, so this has been a big thing. A lot of people have seen on my social medias and stuff. Everybody thinks that I'm about to spray an astronomical amount of nitrous to this thing. But these lines I had made by Firepunk. Len Miller actually made them up for me. I don't know if that's like a service that they offer, so hopefully they don't get upset with me telling them. But they got the XRP crimping tool and everything, and with the way that these nitrous bungs are laid out, I needed like every line to be an inch longer than the previous one, and stuff like that is just not something that you can call Summit or Jags and order. You really got to get into having a line made or making them yourself. And when you're doing nitrous stuff, you can't just make an AN line yourself because of the high pressure. So it actually has to be a crimped in. So if you are gonna make your own nitrous line setup, make sure that you either have access to a crimping tool or you get somebody to crimp it that knows what they're doing. So this is a lot scarier looking than what it really is. 2 of these are Spool Jets. So last year I only had one Spool Jet, and the longest time that it would take me to spool would be from going from high idle to about 2100 RPM where my spool jet would actually come on, because at about 1900 the converter would start to couple pretty good, and it would start to load the engine enough to where it took a few seconds to get past that 1900 to 2200 RPM. So I wanted to do a small, so like you can see here, my first spool jet I'm trying is a 18, which is a little bitty baby jet, and that's coming on at 1600 engine RPM. And so the idea of that is to kind of wick it up to give it a little bit of horsepower to get through that little bit of tight spot in the converter. And then at 2100 engine RPM is when the second spool jet comes on, and I'm starting off small, conservative with that too. It's just a 24 jet. You don't want to start off big with nitrous. You're always better off to start conservative when we're talking about spool ups, because if you put too much nitrous in it too fast, it'll pop and shut off, or it'll backfire out the exhaust and make a big flame. I've done that at the track before, and the guy, the starting line guy, can come running over with a fire extinguisher. So you're better off to always start small. So that is my plan with those 2. And then these 2 are down track kits. And like I said, with these 2, I'm starting off small. The first one is a 50 jet, and then the second one is a 60 jet. So we'll have to play with that and see what I have done. If you guys have seen the videos of this truck run, or if you've seen it run in person, you know it's typical 12 valve, it's smoky. And that is the biggest reason for me wanting to do all this, is not necessarily to make a bunch of horsepower. This is still a filled 5.9 block, so there's only so far I can really go with it without busting the block. But I want to try to make the truck run a lot cleaner. I have added an AFR wideband, so that's air fuel sensor, so I can see what the AFR is doing on this thing. I'm shooting for trying to make it as absolutely as clean as possible, but without hurting the engine. So I'm going to be spending a lot of time looking at AFR, looking at EGT, looking at the cleanliness of it, just the overall health of the engine. These next couple track outings are going to be mainly focused on making the engine happy and making it run clean. So to do so, I have cut my pump all the way back on fuel, and then I'm still running stupid big injectors. They're 5x35s. So it'll be interesting to see how much nitrous I have to add, even with the pump cut all the way back, to make the AFR happy, to make it run clean. From everybody that I've talked to, Ryan, the fire pump guys, Derek Rose, everybody is pretty much trying to shoot for 24 to 28 to 1 on their AFR. So that is, I guess, my target goal with this. But with it being a mechanical setup, there's not many people that have run an AFR. Adam Foltz has. I talked to him about some of his information. But other than him, really nobody else has been doing this. So I don't really know if it's going to be possible to get it that lean. But we will just have to see. That's the target goal. So now I'll bring you guys inside here, and I'll show you where all my nitrous solenoids and everything are. So same as last year, bottle in the same location. I did add a quarter turn valve here because this is a 6-foot line, -6 nitrous line. So whenever you change the bottle before, all of the nitrous that was in this 6-foot line would drain out. So I wasn't super concerned about it before when I was only using nitrous for spool up and to run the water injection. But now that I'm going to be using more nitrous, I don't want to just waste the stuff. So I'll be able to shut this valve off like it is here when I go to change the bottle out, and then I'll only waste this little 14-inch line here. So nothing's changed with the water injection. I don't know if I've ever actually really talked about that. I guess I'll explain this when I get into the nitrous stuff in here. So, this lighting's not that great. This looks like crap right now with the wiring, because this is what I've been troubleshooting. I had a brand new nitrous solenoid that just is bad. You can put power and ground to it, and it won't do anything. So I spent about 3 hours trying to figure that out, because I didn't try the simple stuff first. But it is what it is, part of racing. So, main nitrous line comes into this valve here, which this is currently off. This would be open during a pass. And then I have a nitrous T here. Let me see if I can get some better lighting on this. Mucho better. Okay, so let's restart. Main nitrous line comes into this quarter turn valve here. This is currently off. It would be like this in the open position during the pass. And then that valve there will stay off. So this is my first T. And this is my nitrous pressure sensor, and then there is a line on the back side of that T, and that line goes to my water injection tank here. So this tank here, I fill this with water. It holds about a little bit more than a water bottle's full worth, and then so the nitrous pressure will come to the top of this, and then the bottom of it goes to a solenoid. And then that solenoid has a line that runs out to the intercooler piping. And so this is actually my water injection that I'm pressurizing with nitrous, controlling with a nitrous solenoid. I'm turning that thing on at 50 pounds of boost right now. And then I think I just have a little 33 jet in it. So I'm not spraying very much water at all yet. So, and then from there, it goes to another T that's just capped, and the reason for that is in case I ever want to add another downtrack kit, I can just swap this T out for a 1/4-inch MPT T, and boom, my next downtrack kit is there. 1 kit downtrack, 2 kit downtrack, and then let me get out of the lights here. So then that first one there, that's a spool jet, and then there's one in behind it that is a spool jet as well. And then it goes back to that pressure regulator valve to regulate it down for my air throttle and my shifter. And then that line goes back to that other quarter turn valve. And the reason that you need that valve with this setup is so after your pass, when you need to change the water injection, when you need to add more water to that bottle, you will close this off like this, and then you'll actually open this valve up, and then that'll drain all of the nitrous pressure from here to here, and then your gauge on this will say 0, and then you know you're safe to open this up and add more water. So this is not the best way to do this if you guys are trying to do a max effort nitrous application. Really, there's a lot of flow choke point with this because of the fact that it's all on a rail essentially. If I was trying to use these two down track solenoids to their highest capability, I would want these flowing really well. Ideally, I would like to, you would want separate lines to each solenoid, and then if you had to do a line, you would want to do like a -8 with a Y. But because these solenoids right here, they'll flow a 178 jet each, and that is a lot of nitrous. So I'm not even remotely trying to max these out. I mean, even beyond what I think I'll need, this setup here has enough flow. It's not going to be a problem. I just wanted to throw it out there for you guys that might be trying to run a max effort nitrous combination, that this isn't really the best way to do it. This, for me, is just a really clean way to do it. I like that I can close my glove box and I still have a full interior look. It doesn't look like there's a bunch of nitrous solenoids everywhere. So underneath it here, as you saw those bulkhead fitting pass-throughs at the firewall to pass the nitrous lines through. Pretty simple deal. All this stuff needs tied up in place. I've just been working on it, testing it, so no reason to get it all exactly where it needs to go until it's done. But that is pretty much the synopsis of the nitrous setup that I will be running. And then, unlike most people who are running a nitrous controller, I'm actually using the smart wire to control all these solenoids. The smart wire does not PWM, so I won't be doing any ramping in and out of nitrous with this setup. I'm basically just going to be turning the kits on, and it would seem like that's probably not going to work. But after talking with some people, like Ryan said on his car, he has a 70 jet that he just turns on off the trans brake. So with all of my experience with the four-wheel drive stuff is, if you can just turn a jet on off the brake, then you can turn on another jet, you know, 200 foot down the track or 150 foot down the track. You could just turn that on and it's going to take it because it has enough ground speed, it has enough momentum. Maybe I'll find that I'm wrong about that, but I'm going to start off with no nitrous controller. I just didn't want to add something else to the truck. Smart wire's here. I think I can make this setup work totally fine because I'm not trying to use a ton of nitrous. So we'll see. That's the most fun part of all this stuff, is playing with it and figuring out what does and doesn't work. And then some of the other things that I've changed is I've added some sensors. So I did not have a G meter last year, which is really stupid because a G meter is like the most important tool you could possibly have when you're trying to go fast in a race car. So I added it to this little shelf here. I had my buddy Chris Maston build this shelf up here for me just so I could mount all this stuff really nice and clean in here. So shout out to MassFab once again. But that G meter does lateral G and Excel G. So you can do some trick stuff with lateral G that I won't be doing because this isn't a pro mod. But that's one of the sensors. Another one, like I told you before, was the AFR. And then I've added a turbo speed sensor, which I've got the connector out here, but I haven't put it in the turbo yet. So turbo speed is a big deal in these when you're spraying nitrous, because you do not want on a GT55 your shaft speed to go above 125,000 RPM. From the people I've talked to, 120,000 RPM is when you want to set some sort of limiter. So because I'm using the smart wire to control my nitrous solenoids, I'll have a turbo shaft speed limiter to where if it sees above 120,000, it'll turn one of my down track kits off to save this turbo. So hopefully I don't ever have to use that blanket. And then another thing I did was pan vac this year. So pan vacuum is basically just the pressure that's inside of your crankcase. Ideally, you don't want any pressure in the crankcase. That's why on JP's truck and on this truck, we run the crankcase ventilation lines to the exhaust and through a Venturi's. So that way, when the exhaust is running and it's pressurized, it's actually pulling crankcase pressure out. So it's keeping this at a vacuum at all time. The only thing, we've never had pan vac on JP's truck, so we know that it holds vacuum at idle. You can actually take the fill cap off and you can put a piece of paper right here and it'll hold it there because it's pulling enough vacuum. So pan vac is one of those things that, since I'm going to be running nitrous, and I'm not trying to lean on the engine any harder, but I might end up doing so. So I'm just trying to be precautious with and use as much data as I possibly can to make sure that I don't hurt this thing. And then I finally set up a brake switch sensor. So now I can, I'm doing some stuff with the brake switch for the staging limiter and some other stuff. So just trying to really bring this old 12 valve up into the 21st century and make it as close to a common rail as I possibly can. Got the braces on my injection lines finally. Still got to finish the one up here. So this thing is getting pretty close. It looks like it's ready to race, but it's actually not. I have a lot of stuff, little stuff that I have to do. What I was telling you about earlier, my issue that I had was with a nitrous solenoid being new and not working. But I was like, okay, no big deal. To test this thing, to spool it up, because I really needed to test it this past weekend. I really needed to do a spool up because I'm leaving to go out of town. I'm going to be gone for a while. By the time I come back, I'm supposed to have a test session that I go to down in Clay City, Kentucky that weekend when I come back. So there's a lot of stuff that I got to get done to make that happen. But anyways, so I just made my purge solenoid a spool jet so that way I could go out and test it. And when I pulled it outside, I heard just the slightest little leak, and I thought, nah, you know what, I'll address it after I do a spool up. Like, I really need to see how this thing spools so I can be, thinking about how to, change that and all that stuff. You never just take these things out and spool them up once and they're happy, unless you've done this a million times with the same combo and you know what to change and whatnot. So anyways, so I take it outside. And I go to spool it up, and as soon as I stick it, just nitrous everywhere in the cab. So I shut it off and I checked it, and I have a leak between spool solenoid and the main solenoid, basically my purge and my main solenoid. So I got to take quite a bit of stuff off to fix that. That's the only problem with that board setup that I have, is once everything is good, I think it's great, but servicing it is not exactly the easiest thing. So I guess that's what you deal with when you want to go for a certain kind of look. So then, as far as the other things that needs done to the truck, I still have not swapped the tires. So I'm still on the 315 radials. I really don't want to take it out on those because I have this 2810.5 sitting over there, and that's what I'm going to be running. So I don't know if there's going to be any thing to be gained data wise for taking it out with those over those. So those need to be changed. And then in the back, I don't know if I talked about it in a previous video or not, but I put some stiffer rear springs on the coils here from the videos and what the tire was doing last year. We had the chassis working the best it's ever worked so far, but it definitely, I was having to put too much compression in the shocks to slow the chassis down enough, which tells me that I needed a heavier spring. So these are actually 200-pound springs back here, as where I had 175s before. So I need to test that. There's a lot of things I need to test. I was wanting to change the rear drive shaft. That's the steel one that I got up at World Cup. I was wanting to change that out to my aluminum one because I think it's a tad bit too long, and I'm concerned with compression. It's bottoming out in the transfer case tail shaft, but I don't know that to be 100% certain. So there's just several things that need to be done to the truck. Obviously it needs cleaned. It's terrible. It's filthy. The trailer needs some stuff. I've got to get the generator set up in the trailer, and I've got to wire that in, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to come into play if I'm going to be testing this thing when I get back. But it did pull outside under its own power. It did start up. I tried to spool it. It runs good. It's happy. There's nothing leaking. So definitely some victories in this. This just isn't the video that I was hoping it to be. This is more of a long-winded me rambling on about what I've done, and I want it to be cooler, more action-packed. So I guess we'll just have to wait for the next video for that one. So I'm going to be out of town the 4th. Yes, I think the 4th. This Wednesday, I'm flying out to go see JP, and we are going to sit down and do several videos together. We're going to go over his build with his truck. If you guys don't remember his truck, it still does exist. We're just waiting on some stuff for it, but I'll let him talk about all that. If you guys have any questions for JP, if you remember the build on Comp D, if there's anything you want to ask him, drop comments in these videos, and we will definitely answer your guys' questions. I'm going to make several videos with him while we're out there. Everything from talking about how him and I met, the build process, current events, what's his plans with the truck in the future. So get in the comments and ask away, and we will get JP to answer those questions for us next week. So like always, guys, I appreciate you watching. Hopefully the next one will be more action-packed, but I appreciate it, and we'll catch you on the next one.